This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Shimel. Back here for our next guest on TechStrong TV. And our guest right now is AJ Nash, and he's from Anomali. Hey AJ, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hey Alan, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Absolutely, it's our pleasure. You know, we were talking off camera a bit, and wow, what an interesting background you bring to our show today. Before we jump into what's happening with Anomali and so forth, why don't we give people a little bit of idea? Who's AJ Nash?
Yeah, sure, happy to. As you mentioned, I'm AJ Nash. So my position right now is I'm the Senior Director of Cyber Intelligence Strategy for Anomali. As far as my background, I came out of a traditional intelligence background. I got about 18 years in the intelligence community. I was U.S. Air Force for half that time and a contractor for the other half. I focused in traditional intelligence, counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, countering trafficking in persons, chased war criminals for a couple of years, which was fun work. Mostly worked at the executive level, doing briefings and writing papers for executive leaders, briefing director of NSA, things like that. I spent most of my time at the agency or at Cyber Command. So I spent about the last 5 of those years were spent countering threats in cyberspace. And then I moved into the private sector, and I've been out here now for about 5 years. And primarily my role in the private sector has been working with organizations to either build intel programs or help them mature the programs they have, or in a couple occasions I was involved in building programs myself.
Excellent. What a great background, man. And thanks for all I'm sure you could tell some real war stories if you were allowed to, but what a great experience. Very cool stuff.
Yeah, I was thankful to have the opportunity.
Yeah. We're thankful we had people like you out there doing it. So, but AJ, transitioning from, sort of an NSA or Intel background to private sector like this, you deal with some things that are a little more mundane, perhaps not, right? Depending on what we're dealing with. But we've certainly seen over the last, let's say, 5 years, the whole threat intel industry, or it was a cottage industry at one point, under the whole cyber umbrella, and now it's become much more mainstream, much bigger, much more accepted and everything. But yet still, I don't know if I want to use the word immature, or maybe more art than science still. Talk to me, what are kind of your impressions of how threat intel is fitting in, how it's being used, where does it fit within the cyber organizations at most companies versus the general, beyond cyber, the whole business of C-level and what have you?
Sure. Yeah, no, not to insult anybody, but I think immature probably is the right term. It's been interesting. Like I said, I've been in the private sector now for about 5 years, so I have seen a growth and maturity. We're getting there, but intelligence has been a professional skill set in the government space for decades. So I think we're a long way from catching up to the professionalization that we've seen in the government space. In the private sector, I think we are moving forward. I think organizations have gone from, hey, we need intel. Now they're starting to figure out, well, what is intelligence, right? And one of the challenges that I work with folks on a lot is separating between data and information and intelligence. And a lot of my job, frankly, is I'm not trying to invent new things. It's about bringing the best of breed from the private sector, or from the government space, I should say, into the private sector. So things like Joint Publication 2-0, for instance, or intelligence community directives, bring in doctrine from the government space to teach the private sector how to do professionalized intelligence. So I think that's growing. There's a lot of folks leaving the government who have this background, who are able to get out and teach people how to do it properly. Because the challenges I think we've seen early on, our organizations are starting to get directives from above, from the board or from the C-suite programs, but not really defining what that is. And a lot of times I think you see organizations that take, a really talented person, say the head of their IR department, and who's due for a promotion, and now you're the director of intelligence. And they say, great, and they start trying to build this intel program, but they hire people like themselves. And a lot of times they build really just another incident response type program, something very granular, something very much about atomic indicators, instead of true intelligence, and they don't end up succeeding. The other challenge I think we see a lot of times is organizations that want to invest in intelligence, but they put it in the wrong place in their organization. They build it and put it in the SOC, buried under the blue team, something like that. And they're going to have a hard time with value. So I tell people a lot of times with intelligence, the math equation I use is talent times access times time. So talent being people, obviously, you need the right people to do the work. Access means you need to have enough material, the right material, but then there's always some time factor. Organizations are going to spend a lot of money on these things. It's a reality. Talent costs money. People are hard to get. Good quality intelligence there's a gap there. Access, you have tons of vendors willing to sell you a lot of things, and you need a pretty broad collection capability. Much like the intelligence community has 17 agencies, the private sector, we have a lot of different vendors. So you need to figure out what you need for your specific needs, right? So when you invest all that money, I don't think it's a great plan to put that buried inside your SOC where it only supports your blue team needs or maybe your red team needs and maybe purple team, somewhere in that area. So I've encouraged organizations to look bigger, move your intel organization up, have it support your CISO at a minimum, maybe even the C staff. And you can start having discussions about, physical security and insider threat, which can also work with HR, right? You can work in your M&A organization, patch prioritization, obviously your blue team, your red team, your traditional SOC needs still. But now you're getting more value out of intelligence. So you're building more of a strategic approach to intelligence. So when you spend these hundreds of thousands or possibly millions of dollars, it's easier to get return on investment to be able to document that, especially from a business case.
Yep. One of the problems that I think we have, and it's not just in the threat intel space or intel space, it's in the larger cyberspace, which is when we try to go broader beyond the CISO. We don't do a good job of talking their language.
Right? You're exactly right. Yeah, I think one of the things I've been trying to focus on, and I'll be clear in that I haven't accomplished this yet either. I think there's two languages when you get into the C-suite and you get into the board. They care about risk and they care about profits. Those are kind of the two languages I've assessed right now for these areas. I don't know that anybody yet has been able to measure and marry threat intelligence or cyber intelligence or intelligence in general with risk. So to be truthful, that's one of my projects for this year is I'm trying to get smarter on risk. It isn't a background I have a great deal of information on compared to the intelligence background. But I think the solution is going to be, how do we measure risk reduction? How does intelligence measure against that? And how do you do that in a quantifiable way you can defend, right? Intelligence right now is still very subjective. I think a lot of people see it that way. I've spent a lot of time telling people, you invest in intelligence for the reasons you invest in health insurance or a home security system. You're not going to necessarily be able to get the ROI measurements you would get out of, say, a firewall or endpoint protection, where you can do all the bean counting. This is more about how you set up your risk structure, how you set up your threat structure, how you feel comfortable, right? But that's not a sustainable way of measuring this. So I think right now there's a lot of folks, myself included, who are trying to find a way to tie intel to risk, because risk is the language of the board. And then the other piece is that goes with that is the business aspect of it. If we can reduce risk, we can improve profitability, we can improve our brand, things of that nature, right? So I think ultimately to be successful, we've got to get to a point where we can explain to the board why, if you spend this much money, there's actually value in doing it. And right now that's really, really hard to do. I think most are still looking at it as just straight cost. And the best argument right now is this is the cost of doing business in an interconnected world. And then there's a fear driver to that. You don't want to end up on the list, right? We all know the list. There's a lot of large companies on the list that have had major breaches. It's very easy to look back and say, if you only spent $4 million on intel, you could have saved the $90 million cost of the breach. But long term, I think we've got to figure out a way to tie this to risk. And that's one of my pet projects for the year. And if I'm going to be really honest about it, I'm a little behind, frankly. It's a hard thing to do, and I haven't figured it out yet.
It is, and you're not the first person to bang your head on that wall. But sooner or later, you'll either get a very soft head, or you break through the wall. So I'm not as well versed in, let's say, threat intel and intelligence, but I am well versed in trying to convey risk to C-suites, right? In my past lives, and I will tell you that even there's risk and there's risk, right? The language of risk they understand is actually very closely tied to profits. Yep. It's very closely tied to revenue, right? Because truthfully, they don't give a hoot about their reputation unless you can show how their reputation is going to affect their bottom line, right? And so going in there and talking to them about whether we should whitelist or blacklist, right, stuff, or why we need better SIM and log or what have you to lower risk because it's going to give us a 22% reduction in risk is not the risk they know about, right? The risk to them is really it's financial risk, right? And everything gets tied to that language of business, and it's
absolutely. Yeah,
right.
I think
In cyber, we talk right, but we talk cyber risk. They talk business risk.
Exactly, and I think that's a really important point, right? And I have a benefit of not being remarkably technical because my background was traditional intel and personalities and geopolitics and things like that. I tend not to fall into that category, right? So I look at reputational risk, business risk. And that's a key piece, right? The board does not care about, the 22% reduction on the SOC, based on the SIM. If you put this intel in and these alerts, they don't care about that. They're gonna tune that out. They do care about understanding that there's adversaries that are after our industry or our geography, and by making these changes, we lower our we shrink our footprint, we lower our risk, and the result is going to be X if you are actually compromised. They do understand the measurements of back end risk. Once you've been compromised. Right. How bad will things be? Like the FAIR model, things of that nature.
So FAIR is a perfect example.
Exactly. What we need to do is figure out the front end that goes with that. FAIR does a great job of telling you if you're compromised, how bad is it going to be, how much will it cost you. Nobody's figured out the front end to say, how do we reduce the possibility of even getting to the FAIR model? How do we keep from being compromised? And I think that's what we're working very hard on is understanding adversaries that have interests in us, what their capabilities are, what the likelihood of their actually showing up at our doorstep is, and then being able to extrapolate and say, if this happens based on past experiences, this is likely to be the damage that'll be caused, and this is our reputational damage, and as a result, you want to avoid that problem, right? Because if you're a financial institution, for instance, people won't invest in you if you get compromised, or if you're God forbid, if you're a cybersecurity organization and you get compromised, it's pretty bad for your business. So I think that's the case we need to work more on. With the executive level. And it's like you said, it's hard. My head isn't soft yet, but it's certainly working its way there. I'm trying at this point to reach out to a few folks I know that are really, really smart on risk and see how we can partner together and have more discussions on this. Because I don't think I'm going to tackle it myself this year. It's just, it's hard.
It's tough. It's tough. I will tell you that, originally when the rise of the CISO became a thing, right? Because I've been in security 20 years, that was part of their mission, was to be the translator. The nexus, right, between the business C-suite and the security SOC and so forth. You know what, AJ, I realize, and off camera, I have someone I'd like to introduce you to, I think, and help you with that. But let's talk a little bit. You do work for Anomali, and we really didn't talk much about what Anomali does and how it fits into this.
So why don't we do that for a little bit?
Yeah, that'd be great. Anomali, full confession, I was a customer. That's how I came to the company, right? So I mentioned building intel programs and talent access time, right? And all this access. So if you're going to bring all of these pieces together, all these different collection capabilities from all these amazing vendors, it's too much for people to process. So I was looking for what was known as a threat intelligence platform, which Anomali, we have one. It's called ThreatStream. And it's the flagship product of the company, right? So I POC'd several different platforms. And I ended up choosing Anomali as the company I went with, right? So with a threat intelligence platform like ThreatStream, you're able to take all of these various sources of data and information, and in some case intelligence, bring them together. We have a machine learning algorithm that dedupes these bits of information, that adds context to them, that can add some confidence to it. So the idea is to give an analyst more opportunity to succeed. I can't go through millions and millions of articles, right? So the technology makes it easier for me to work with. Beyond that, we also have a couple other products in the suite. We do have Anomali Lens, and Lens is a natural language processing tool we have that's really, really cool. There's a couple of very cool things. From an analyst standpoint, it makes your analysts smarter faster. In simple terms, the ability to be browsing all the different sources we all read on a daily basis and have context brought directly to my screen, so I understand, what is this CVE without having to go back and look for it, or who is this adversary, because I can't keep track of everything in real time. And make sense of that and even connect that back to my environment. And then the third product we have is known as Anomali Match. And what Anomali Match does is I tell people I think it completes the promise of the SIM. SIM technologies are incredibly powerful and very useful and really needed in most SOCs. But we've run into some challenges with SIMs. They're overwhelmed by a lot of the data. Sometimes they tip over. If you want to do a retrospective search, if you want to get to patient zero during an incident response, in most cases, you're not going to make it. You know, it takes 6-8 months of back research to find that. And most SIMs will tip over if you try to go that far back. Or people end up having to pick and choose what they even run through their SIM. So a lot of organizations don't even run their email traffic doesn't actually go through the SIM because it's too cumbersome. And that's where a lot of your problems are going to be. So we have this platform that actually works with the SIM and does real-time matching of intelligence. So in the real time, you can actually get context on all the alerts coming in, the thousands and thousands of alerts, so you know what to prioritize and look for. But also in retrospective, we can do a retrospective search for months or years, and it takes milliseconds to get accomplished. It's because we're only using the metadata. So what we can do is put people in a position where we can do a really, really quick search on that, and literally we measure it in milliseconds to seconds, and tell you where patient 0 was. It was this endpoint, this date, this time. Then you can go reach back and pull that full log. You know exactly which one to go pull and look for. So these incident responses where you have 15-minute calls or hourly calls, and the CISO's upset and everybody's chewing on your neck and it's really hard and it's stressful, and you're saying, well, we're waiting on the SIM to come back with an answer for us. We're still trying to find it. Those first couple of calls are really productive. So when you put that all together, it's a really great platform as a whole. It's a unified suite of products that allows you to work with both the SOC and the Intel analysts, connect all those things together and give you some really solid solutions. So I'm really excited about it. I love working with our team, with our customers. And now part of my role is in the product office. I actually work with our Intel team to help make these products better because we represent, sort of our customer base. So we bring in that information back in, and then we're also testing things in advance to say, would this work in the environment? Is this an improvement? Is this good enough? So it's a really exciting time for us.
Very cool. And Anomali is ANAMOLI.
That's correct, yeah.
.com.
Yep, Anomali.com. We're based out of Redwood City, so we're right there with all the tech giants out there. It's a fun place to be. It's a really good team. I'm really excited about it, and I'll put a quick plug in. As far as our credibility, our CEO is he founded ArcSight, so he's the godfather of SIM to begin with, and then we essentially founded the threat intel space, the threat intel platform space as well. So a lot of smart people, a lot of people better than myself, obviously. So I'm just excited to get a chance to work here. Very
cool, man. So tell the truth, do you ever miss being back in sort of human intel and government and that stuff?
Yeah, it's funny. It comes and goes. There's a lot of things about the government space I don't miss. But every once in a while I get a little wistful. True confession, I just started catching up on the show Jack Ryan. And it only took me a few episodes of that to go, God.
Season 1 or season 2?
I've finished both now.
Okay.
Thanks to COVID, I'm home, so I get to binge watch a lot of things.
Yeah,
but it brought up some memories, and I chatted with some old folks I used to work with, and yeah, I miss some of the mission, I miss some of the service, but we are lucky to be in a position where I work with some good people now. In the private sector, and we work with some folks in the government space, and I still have friends I get to work with and consult with. So I miss some of the mission, certainly occasionally, and some of the camaraderie. But there's a time for everything. We have good people doing that work now. I'm real confident in the future for us, and I'm happy to be doing what I'm doing right now, trying to help some other people.
Very cool, man. Hey, AJ, thanks for joining us on TechStrong TV.
Continued success.
Great conversation. Say hello to all our friends at Anomali.
Definitely, yeah. And thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Happy to come back anytime, man.
Absolutely. We'll have you on. AJ Nash from Anomali on TechStrong TV with me here today. This is Alan Shimel. We're out right now. We'll be right back with our next guest.